Feeling anxious? Are you losing hope? Then who are you going to call? I'll tell you in a moment. Stay tuned. Welcome to this episode of I Didn't Know That Was in the Bible. Today we're going to be talking about our faith, our hope, and our protection. Now, what is it about this generation that seems to turn to everything except God during a time of crisis? Not too long ago, back when we had 9/11, we found that shortly after that the churches were packed with people and that prayer was very common. And yet when we look today, when we have this pandemic that extends across the whole globe, that people are turning to everything but God. They seem to be turning to drinking, drugs, pornography, you name it. But what is the first thing they close? Not the bars. No. They start closing the churches. And why is that? It's because we are becoming more and more secular in our society. And I think God is really trying to get our attention. And if you look at the book of Exodus, for example, so how did God get Pharaoh's attention? Is when these 10 plagues came upon the land. And we're in the midst of a plague right now. But what I like to do is I like to take a look at one of these plagues. And this was the 10th one. This was the one, of course, that led to the Passover. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at Exodus chapter 12. And I'm going to be starting around verse 5 and go through to verse 7. Now, to set the stage again, Moses had asked Pharaoh, whose heart was hardened, to basically let his people go and properly worship God. And yet, because his heart was hardened, Pharaoh would not let the people go. So there were numerous plagues that followed, turning water into blood, for example. We had the plagues of frogs and lice and many other things that eventually led to the death angel that would be passing over and destroying all the firstborn, both of humans and of animals. And so that takes us to this point where the instructions given to the people of God to what they should do in order for that death angel to pass over their home. So starting at verse 5, okay, it reads, "The animals you choose must be year-old males without defect, and you may take them from the sheep or from the goats." Now, there's also some symbolism going on here, and I think it's fairly evident. What we're looking forward to is Jesus Christ, because he will become ultimately the true Passover lamb. He will be our sacrifice. And so indeed, Jesus was male, and he was without defect. When he was up on the cross, none of his bones were broken, which was another requirement of this lamb. And when Jesus was on the cross, remember, they had gone along and they were breaking all the legs to bring an early death to those that were being crucified. But when they came to Jesus, he was already dead. And so a spear was thrust into his side and blood and water poured out, which also was a foreshadowing of the blood and wine that we would see during the time when we would take the Eucharist. That was indeed his blood that we were partaking. Now verse 6, "Take care of them until the 14th day of the month, when all the people of the community of Israel must slaughter them at twilight." Verse 7, "Then they are to take some of the blood and put it on the sides of the tops of the door frames of the houses where they eat the lambs." Now, when you look at the doorpost, that too can be a type. So when they put the blood on the top, right, on the side, and on the side, it's like very much doing this, the sign of the cross. And it shows what? It shows our faith in God, that we know that whenever danger surrounds us, as this plague did then, as this plague is now, that we set our sights on God, that we make that sign of the cross in faith and look towards Him, and He will deliver us and give us protection. That's the point there. Okay, so where I like to go next is I like to go to the book of Ezekiel. And we're going to be going to chapter 9, and we're going to be looking at verses 3 through 4. Now this is a prophecy, and this is a prophecy that looks forward to the end. So it's yet future to us as well too. And you know, it's interesting, and again, this should get our attention, but when you look at a lot of the prophecies that look towards the end, their description of the way the societies are, the way that the world is, could be a carbon copy of what is going on today. I mean, just point by point by point by point, you will find that we have now fit the mold that God had told us would be society in its end times. And that in itself should get our attention. And also bring hope, because we show that ultimately God is in control. And we know what happens at the end of the book, that God will have the victory, which means victory for us as well too. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at verse 3. Now, the glory of the God of Israel went up from above the cherubim where it had been, and moved to the threshold of the temple. Then the Lord called to the man clothed in linen, who had the writing kit at his side, and said to him, Go throughout the city of Jerusalem, and put a mark on their foreheads of those who grieve and lament over all the detestable things that are done in it. Now that's a point too. This is a realization that all God's people have, that they're able to really see what is going on in this world and understand through the scripture that this is something that will come about, and that we should have or keep that faith because of the fact that we know what the end will be, and that if we stay the course, that we keep our beliefs, that we get down on our knees and pray and believe that we will be protected, that God will do so. And that exactly is what's saying on here. They're putting that sign again on the forehead. Now that sign really spiritually is the truth and the knowledge of God. It's that which is truly in our foreheads, and it's that will deliver us from all our fear. So again, our faith brings about hope, and that hope will tell us that we have God's protection and that we should not fear. All right, the next place I'd like to go to, this is a fairly quick lesson, but again, it's just 3 areas that we look at where it is that God will provide us that hope, and what the key to that is in Revelation, and we're going to be looking at chapter 7, and we're going to be starting at verse 1. After this, I saw 4 angels at the 4 corners of the earth, holding back the 4 winds. Now, whenever we read this means this is just prior to the destruction of this earth age, because they're holding back the winds. So this is just prior to that. And it goes on to say, and holding back the 4 winds of the earth to prevent any wind from blowing on the land or on the sea or on any tree. Then I saw another angel coming up from the east, having the seal of the living God. He called out in a loud voice to the 4 angels who had been given power to harm the land and the sea, Do not harm the land or the sea or the trees until we put the seal on the foreheads of the servants of God. So, and of course, what is that seal? It's the same seal that was spoken about in the book of Ezekiel. Again, it's that seal, that knowledge of the living God. God exists. God is real. No matter how much the secular world tries to tell you differently, that's the hope that we have to, again, hold on to. Now, there's another type of seal, and this is a seal that we need to be aware of, and one that we have to protect ourselves from. And that we can read about in Revelation chapter 13, and we're going to be looking at verses 16 and 17. So, and now at this point, the Antichrist is on the earth, and he's portraying himself to be Jesus Christ. And of course, all those in the secular society that were non-believers are now subtly going to be converted, because they're going to see this miraculous being that's doing miracles on this earth and calling himself Jesus. And now they're readily going to believe that it is Jesus Christ, except it isn't Christ at all. Because anybody that had that truth, that knowledge in their forehead, would know that the Antichrist comes first, claiming that he is Jesus Christ, and that the true Christ will not come until the seventh trumpet sounds, the furthermost trumpet out there. Okay, so let's take a look at verses 16 and 17. And this is the Antichrist. Who's being referred to? He also forced everyone, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on his right hand or on his forehead. And here we go. He's copying again what it is in Christ and what God does, as we'd read previously in the earlier book in Revelation 7. Except in this case, the mark is not and the forehead is not truth, but deception. And of course, that deception is to accept this Antichrist. So when you hear this idea of 666, being tattooed on the forehead, or they talk about computer chips being inserted, that has nothing whatsoever to do with it. What that is telling us is that what that mark is the deception that will be going on. And so, and when they talk about it being in the hand, it means not only would you accept this false teaching, but that also you would be doing his work as well. You would be doing the Antichrist work, which is something that we need to avoid. Verse 17. So that no one could buy or sell unless he had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of his name. And I guess this may need a little explanation, but once again, people think that 666, and they've tried different ways of trying to interpret it, but very simply it means the sixth seal, the sixth vial, and the sixth trump or trumpet, which is read about in the book of Revelation. Each one of those describes the Antichrist and what he will be doing on the earth. And that's all that's involved with that. So what do we get from all of this? Well, quite simply, is that we always need to have the truth of God embedded in our forehead. And where do we get that truth? We get that truth from the Word of God, from reading His Word and understanding what it is that He wants for us to do in our lives. And once we have that faith, then we have that hope, which no one can take away from us. And that hope is a guarantee of protection from God during times of crises. So, again, I hope you enjoyed this. As always, again, I ask for a thumbs up if you indeed got something out of this lecture. I also ask that you subscribe and comment as well, too. And of course, also I mentioned not only subscribe, but ring the notification bell to let you know that other lessons or new lessons will be out. Again, I can emphasize that the only way I'm going to know that you're out there and that you're enjoying these lectures is by hearing from you, either through seeing you hitting the subscription bell, which is free. It doesn't cost anything. It's just a little way that you get notified that whenever one of my new lessons are up, but more importantly notifies me that you're out there and interested in listening. and that's important to me because, again, I think our duties as Christians is to try to get out and to evangelize. Because I think if we're going to ever see an end to all that's going on that's bad in this world today, it's because of our faith and our trust, and more important, really, our prayers. And of course, in order to pray, we really need to know who we're going to pray to. And if people are looking to alcohol and drugs and in all the wrong directions, they're never ever going to get there and to get all of us there in order to change the world into a better place. So again, God bless. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I hope to see you soon.